Say all this to say, this is how far back it was when women started to become combative and aggressive and all of that. So here's what you got to understand. If your woman isn't being led, when you look at the Nation of Islam, those women are led, not just by their men, but by community. There's an understanding of what's expected, not just from your woman individually, but from all women in that group. It's the same thing with the Muslim women over in the Middle East. All of those women, there's an expectation of them to behave from all of the men and women around them. So not only do the men hold them accountable, the women hold them accountable. Had a guy jump in the comments the other day, man, said, man, it don't matter what religion woman belong to. I just married a Muslim right before she got married. If she's in America, bro, she ain't authentic unless she's tightly blanketed by the organization. If she's from the Middle East and now she's over here, that's not the same thing. If she's not really practicing, if her parents were Muslim and she just grew up, that's not the same thing. What we're talking about here is the Americanization of a woman destroys her. So whatever Muslim woman he was talking about was an Americanized version of a Muslim woman.
I hope you guys were able to hear that clearly. Sergeant Willie Pete, he has addressed the point that you've made. You guys know his name. You guys know his voice. The Book of LBRY. Now, people have differing opinions on him. But when he does these analyses, I found him to do them pretty objectively. I don't say they're objective because I agree, but because he's pretty level-headed about it. And you don't really easily get him to just jump into conclusions that are emotionally charged. Book of LBRY sitting up here, and he is telling us in no uncertain terms that when you sit up and say that you smashed a Muslim woman, or you know about this Muslim woman being unchaste, that that does not mean you can use that to discredit the actual teachings, the doctrine. There are the rules, and then there are the ways that people behave. And this is one of the reasons why you have to have forgiveness and why there must be repentance, and we rely on God's mercy, the men and the women alike. This is necessary. If you don't have that, then everybody's going to hell. From the first sin of any human being, they will just be bound to, all of us will be bound to hell if God had no mercy. If nothing was forgivable. And sex is a human weakness for healthy adults, whether it's marital or fornication. So therefore, or concubinage, which is also allowed in Islam and was allowed in the Old Testament too. So therefore, at the end of the day, it comes down to this, that you can sit up and say, well, I know this Muslim woman and she did X, Y, and Z, and so therefore it doesn't matter to me. Well, that's where the mistake comes in. And BOA now is telling you what I've said before. When you find these women of the West that are Muslim and they slipping up and they got the same attitudes, consciously and unconsciously, that are just downright offensive by anyone's standards, you are sitting up here and you're thinking, well, that means that there's nothing really different about the faith itself. It's all the same. And what I'm telling you is that in actuality, you have a misbehavior. This is why it is that I live around Arabs in an Arabic-speaking country. And I see them behave and misbehave. And I don't sit up and say, well, the religion ain't true because look what they're doing. I wasn't able to say that about Christianity back before I became Muslim. I couldn't say, well, the behaviors of the Christians are why the religion is not true. What I could say is, obviously, they don't believe in it because of some of the things that they not only do, but then turn around and argue like these things are right. Or like there shouldn't be any kind of punishment or consequence for these things. I had a pastor once tell me, a pastor, sit up and tell me, look, if we get drunk and I give you oral, then you shouldn't really trip too much off that. You should be able to say the next morning, but you know, that's Rev. He don't mean no harm. He human. And I was like, see, okay. And that was the last time we hung out. I'm like, no, bro. No. Mm-mm. Because for one, even when drunk, I didn't expose myself. That's the first thing. Once I had enough to drink to where I would feel sleepy, I knew not to expose myself. So forget fornicating while drunk, even with a lady. So with a dude, what, I'm supposed to expose myself to teeth? These are instincts, by the way. So I had to sit up and say, no, that's not just a joke. It's not no big deal. That's a pretty big deal, according to any standards, because even in the Old Testament, things like this within the same gender were more severely punished than this sort of slip up between the genders. But I couldn't sit up and say, well, he proved the gospel wrong. I could say that he obviously did not study it. Now, later on, I was able to sort out the theological questions I had by understanding that the Old and New Testament did not answer them, especially the New Testament. The answers just simply weren't there. They were not clear. Got Paul saying that Jesus is God, the Son of God. You got other disciples saying that God sent Jesus, alayhi salam, but by the same token, it still didn't answer why the most innocent of people, according to them, had to pay the price for the guilty. Where's the justice in that? How does that work? So in order for me to be able to sin and still be redeemed, I can't turn to God for forgiveness and deliverance. I have to sit up here and plead the blood of an innocent who got not only executed, but painfully and slowly at that. Pretty much depicting God to be a stubborn old goat with a bad temper and a bloodthirsty need to see human beings suffer. That's how this depicted the Lord of the worlds. Creates galaxies with a command. I'm not saying they don't take hundreds of millions of years to form, but what I am stating is that, he creates galaxies with a command. He creates the universe with a command. And then after all of that, he needs little itty bitty you and me in the grand scheme of the entire creation to suffer so that we don't burn forever in a fire that never burns out. And we Muslims do believe that hell and paradise are forever. We believe that. But the question would be, how do you earn something like that simply by sinning when you were tested with free will from the very beginning? It's when you don't repent. There's degrees to this. But the behavior of somebody is not going to be enough to prove the doctrine wrong. You got to understand that if you really truly believe that the Old Testament or the New Testament are correct, and you see people following that or claiming that, and they start misbehaving, you got to call them out on what it is that they believe. You can question whether or not that individual believes it. You could question that. But understand this, when I tell you what the solution is, I tell you what the solution is. I don't tell you that everybody properly applies the medicine. I never made that claim, and I'm not about to. Everybody knows that not everybody properly applies the medicine. Many people refuse to do it because it takes self-discipline. Now, what separates somebody from someone else is that they turn around and say that what this particular act is right when you know that it's wrong, or vice versa. If they sit around, if a Muslim sits up and says that to give charity is wrong, then they have nullified something in the religion that's actually correct. They have changed one of the rulings. It's clear cut. Giving charity is a good deed in our faith. Clear cut. You can't turn around and say that it's wrong. Now, you could say that it's so unwise or that it's so dangerous in a particular situation. You could say that, but just in general, or, giving charity just enables the poor. Giving charity enables laziness and things like that. As a general rule, nope, No, it relieves anxiety. It doesn't enable laziness. By definition, people that need charity are already in trouble. If they're truly lazy, they keep on coming back. You're going to look at them and say, dang, you really don't try, do you? You were just here 2 hours ago. Yeah, but you know, I went to McDonald's and okay, all right, yeah, but you were just here 2 hours ago. What are you going to do after they keep on coming back for more charity and more charity? Eventually, you're going to say, listen, I got this work that I need someone to do. I'll pay you this much. And they bounce on you because they ain't finna work. That's how you can tell the difference. But somebody will turn around and say, well, that's the wrong thing to do. Well, it's, we Muslims are not allowed to say something like that. That actually kicks us out the fold because we got a clear-cut ruling and we can't turn around and pronounce permissible what is clearly impermissible, or pronounce impermissible what is clearly permissible, let alone encouraged to do as a good deed. These are different things. But he pointed to something. America, and he continued after the clip that you heard, BOA continued by stating that America is designed to change women, to empower women in all the wrong ways, to compete with men. So when some of you sit up and say, well, I smashed a Muslim woman, and you brag about this stuff, some of you guys, there was one guy going to Malaysia. He posted pictures of some women in a hijab with himself, and then start talking about, they wild when you get them in the sheets. I was like, bro, if you don't fuck the shuck up, you wasn't supposed to fornicate with them nowhere. They wasn't supposed to fornicate with you. And by the way, in the Sharia, what you did is a capital offense. Yeah, it's a capital punishment. She gets flogged. You get the chop chop. I don't think Malaysia does that. Depends on which state you're in, I think. Indonesia, they probably would, depending on which province you're in. Banda Aceh province in Indonesia, and probably another one too. I think it's Kelantan province, if I'm not mistaken. But there's some province where they go by the Sharia. You do that around them, you do that there, and they find out. Because you confessed, she didn't confess. There's no proof. So she might actually not really go through much. She might go through nothing at all because she never confessed. But you set up and confessed and said you laid down with a Muslima. You got it. There's a confession. You get the chop chop. You'll send your body back to your family and be like, okay, you bury him according to your own belief system. We're not going to bury him over here. You want to repatriate the body? Be our guest. If not, we'll just bury him in a non-Muslim cemetery. But the next person that does this and then says something about it and then says that they did this is going to get the same punishment because you got a confession. So we know that somebody did something. And if not, then we're going to have to find out. The investigation's got to prove that this dude was lying. And if it's proven that he was lying, then he's still going to be in trouble because he ruined a reputation. We're not playing games when it comes to that. So some dudes that like to sit up and attack religion, that's bad enough as far as we are concerned. You want to attack the belief in God. I mean, without God, we would not have had an oppressor, true, but without God, we would not have survived the oppressor either. But nonetheless, you want to sit up here and brag about how you've gotten Muslim women to just violate all of their own boundaries and compromise all their own boundaries. Bruh, what type of Muslim woman do you think that is? How responsible do you think she is according to what she herself says she believes? You want to sit up here and take a woman that'll fornicate with you, that'll fornicate, period, but then with you, of all people, a non-Muslim, and say that that's some sort of example? No. Was the Ku Klux Klan an example of the Christianity that they claimed? What about the Black Legion? Closely affiliated with the Klan. Were they an example of the Christianity that they claimed, an example of the New Testament, or the modern day Republicans? An example of the Christianity that they claim? Is that who they are? Is that what they are? Does Jesus love them because they just believe in being strict in Jesus' name? Oh, they strict on everybody else in Jesus' name. They ain't strict on themselves. You saw what they did January 6th. And you've seen what they've done even before then. You've seen Trump lie about reading the Bible, but he didn't know what was in it. That was the first election. That's why it is I look at some of you in the second election, I'm like, what are you championing him for? It's one thing to say that you clearly voted for this particular reason. Sperling pretty much handled that fairly well. Attorney Sperling, he's like, look, I'm voting for this reason, but I'm telling you to look out for your interests. Well, most of the time, our interests were in other parties. If you believe in voting at all, in this particular context, I'm not against voting, but I am in the context of that government over there. It's a two-party system. I don't believe democracy really does much, not in the long run. I'm not a belief in dictatorships and communism either. I'm just simply saying that, well, look, we Muslims have our own political system in the first place. That's the thing. It's not in place in almost anywhere in the globe. You got a few provinces or some states and some countries that will apply it. The national governments don't. So even then, they could be overridden by these national federal governments, such as in Indonesia. But in any case, again, what I'm getting at is that you got these guys out here bragging about stuff just to try to discredit a solution because they don't want to practice the self-discipline within that solution. Some of them want to say, well, the self-discipline you're talking about is not even realistic. Now that that could be a valid point depending on the conditions of the orders. But see, we Muslims don't have a rule that says you can't marry until you're this old. You got to be an adult. Yeah. And we define that by puberty. We don't have a rule that says you have to be in your 30s before you can get married. We don't even have a rule that says you have to be well off, rich before you can get married. Our history is replete with the poor getting married. It's going to always cost less to go and until Muslims change certain things, it's going to always cost less for Muslims in any area to go to a red light district in which nobody wants to be seen and buy something temporarily than it is going to cost for them to get married. Until Muslims make changes to make marriage easier, that's going to always be the case. There are going to be many people that are still going to go the route of marriage and chastity. There are going to be some that are going to go the easy route because it's more affordable, more convenient in the short run, not in the long run. Everybody knows that. That's going to be the case as long as people are people. But if you're running around here saying what you did to a Muslim woman because that's the ultimate violation, and it gives you the most bragging rights amongst the wrong circles of friends and the wrong people, then you're going to have to keep in mind that, number one, you're setting yourself up. You truly are. You don't know when and how it catches up with you. I don't know. A particular government could be in place in a particular place, you could say. And then when that happens, the law could be such that, you know what? Anybody who knows of a man that did this is then required to turn them in. And some of you in here, it's not that many right now, but they do exist. But there's some of you out here bragging about it. Well, dang, bro, if you sitting up here bragging about it, then chances are we gonna find out. So imagine that you go somewhere like Malaysia, and you mess around and you go to Terengganu as a tourist, but you posted when you were in KL about this sort of thing, and I find out that you're in Terengganu. Guess what? I'm letting you know now. I believe in snitching. I don't go by Nick Kilcher, hey man, stop snitching. I don't have an agreement with anybody to hide their particular crimes. I'm not participating in these crimes with them. And in Terengganu, that's going to be a crime. They might get you for what you did in Selangor State, which is where KL is. I don't know. Not the legal expert, but I do know that you ain't going to sit up there and brag about what you did with a Muslim woman, and I would say the same thing to non-Muslim women, but there's one difference. They don't. Non-Muslim women ain't sitting up here bragging about. They're not bragging about what they got a Muslim man to do and how they got him to violate his own boundaries and break his own rules. They don't do that. If they did brag about this sort of thing, I'd say something to them too, but they don't. Usually they sit up and they're just like, I ain't gonna tell nobody. Sometimes they'll say to the man, oh, Islam, huh? That's yeah, you ain't really about it. Sometimes they'll do that. I've seen that happen before. But this notion y'all have of I'm just going hard on, I'm just being patriarchal. Well, I am patriarchal, but this notion that I'm just being possessive of the women, well, you know what? Again, let the non-Muslim women start bragging about getting Muslim men to do stuff like this. And even though they're already making themselves look bad, I'm still going to sit up and say, well, yeah, y'all need to cut that mess out because you're sitting up here telling on yourselves and I'll rat your butt out too, because that rule is across the board. Fornication is across the board, but you do not sit up here and you ain't Muslim, you don't involve a Muslim in fornication. Punishment is different in that regard, according to Islamic law. We don't owe apologies for this stuff. And so in your efforts to sit up here and try to discredit the doctrine, when you could just simply not follow it, if you're not convinced, some of you are going too far and setting yourselves up, trying to discredit it. And all you're really doing is just showing the power of the system in which these ladies are coming up when they do these things. Understand this. It's not just America either. It's the entire West that is designed to do this exact same thing to any tradition of chastity, whether it is religious or purely cultural. It is designed to do this to any tradition of chastity. They are not playing. They want to ruin chastity across the board for everyone. They want a situation in which you got pretty much all the women with really high body counts and a list of demands as if they don't have any of these things. So I'm late, Captain. And a situation in which all the dudes are really inexperienced and neglected and overlooked and seen as worthless and embarrassing to any woman that would be seen out in public with them and pick them. That's what they're looking for. To them, as far as they're concerned, so what? It's kind of a way for them to make a lot of money and tons of money by taxing whatever industries that develop so that men can cope. And the funny thing is, it's going to wind up backfiring as these women mess around and develop coping mechanisms that are also going to fund other industries. It's already starting. Matter of fact, that's been the case for a long time. The ladies are set up here already, and they bought, they've been spending money on toys, dogs, large size dogs too. I need protection. You're right. Rabbits, each other. So even that is backfired. And that's the system. And all you're really doing is illustrating how bad the system is. And you're proving the points of SYSBM and Passport Bros. You're proving the point that you don't take these broads from where they are. Well, they're not broads at that point, the ladies, but you don't take them from where they are into an environment that's going to turn them into your basic broad. Then after that, into your basti niches. Hope this helps.